humble servant was the producer of this documentary, so I'm not going to talk. I'm going to get the hosts to do the talking. So, first of all, thanks, Braxton, for coming here.
Thank you.
Being with us. I know it's not an easy trip, especially the winter season, but let's get both of you guys to tell us a little bit about why did you decide to do this? Was it because I forced you? Or I begged you? What did I do so that you decided to do this thing? Go ahead.
Well, in my case, Edwin called and he said, Braxton, I need you to go to Turkey with me. And so he called, and honestly, when Ed first called me, I think you called me earlier in the year, and it was kind of a maybe this will happen, maybe it won't, or at least that's what I took away from it. Maybe that was just my skepticism. And as the months rolled by, we were, 2 months out from when the trip would occur, and he called and he said, I really need you to go ahead and decide whether you're going to do this or not. And I said, I'll do it if it's no more than 2 weeks. And we were there for a month, by the way. I said, I'll do it if it's no more than 2 weeks. He said, I think maybe we can, we'll talk about it kind of thing. And so here's the interesting thing in my case. And I don't mean to suck the air out of the room. I will let Stephen talk. But excuse me. Yeah, I'll let you talk. But this is serious, and I wanted to get this out. Last summer, I was praying about my ministry, but and about our school, Trinity College of Bible and Theological Seminary, and I was thinking, what does God want for this and how it impacts the kingdom? And we have another professor that's very well known in the States in theological circles named Leighton Flowers, and that has brought a lot of students to our school, and then those students learn to preach the gospel, and they go out and impact the world. And I can't convince you of this. I don't know how to say this without it sounding a certain way. But all I can do is assure you of it, that in the moment I was praying this way, I told the Lord, I said, Lord, if you want to make my platform bigger or me a little bit more well-known because it'll impact the school and thereby the kingdom, then I'll be willing to do that. And if it's hard, whatever it is that's hard, I'll do it, Lord. Now, that would sound like an arrogant prayer because it almost sounds like I'm asking, Lord, make me famous, and that may be the prayer Stephen prayed, I don't know. But in my case,
it's not working.
In my case, I really wanted it for the kingdom. And the next day after I prayed that prayer, I booked a debate with the guy who is currently the world's most famous debating atheist. And his name's Matt Dillahunty. He has a televised show called The Atheist Experience and all that. And we debated just about a month ago. But I booked that debate the day after. And then the next day after that, the Turkey trip, the documentary. And so I believe, as much as I can know about anything, that this documentary was an answer to prayer for my life, but not about me, but so that the kingdom would be more well known. So that's kind of how it all came together. Now, I was very, everyone in the States was telling me, well, I don't know if you want to do this. I mean, it seems like a dangerous trip. I don't know. Do you really want to go there? But I knew I had Ed and Steve, so it was going to be fine. Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, mine wasn't an answer to prayer, I think.
Yeah.
Mine was on the promise that I'd be as famous as David Attenborough. But we have to work on that. Yeah, we have to work on that. No, basically, I saw that as, firstly, a challenge, something new and exciting to do. I'm a traveling person anyway, and I've been to a lot of countries around the world. I've been to Turkey before, too, but that was in, 1973?
Yes, before I was born.
Before you were born, yeah, I told you that. That's right. Yeah. This is my son here. He's a young man. He's just a young man. Yeah. He's just a young man. I saw it as a challenge and saw it as something exciting and different and new, and something that I could support because it is promoting the kingdom. It's promoting an awareness of the historical sites, which are biblical. They're real. And I think to be able to present that is really what is the undercurrent of this whole movie or documentary that we've been trying to put together. What I do have to say is that We formed a great friendship.
That's true. Yeah.
And in fact, with Sarah also. That was the surprise of the trip, I think, that how well we bonded.
We did.
And we really got on so well together and enjoyed each other's company and sparring with one another.
Yeah.
It was really good. And that I think, made this whole thing worthwhile in terms of all the difficulties and problems that we had. Very much the same as tonight. We sat here not knowing what we're supposed to be saying.
Yeah.
And it was exactly the same. We would get on the bus from the hotel, going to a location to shoot, not knowing what we were going to be saying.
That's right.
And we're sort of talking about it in the bus on the way, saying, well, I think it's this. No.
There's a movie out there Steve Martin plays. It's called Bowfinger. If you've ever seen that movie. The guy wants to make a movie and he's got no script, nothing. He just improvisation. So that's what we did for the documentary. But you know what? I think one of the things that Braxton brought is a team of scholars back home that did a lot of scripting and research and writing. So we were fortunate that we had some backup that in case we got stuck, they could help us out, which they did. We do give them credit at the end that, you know, we named them one by one who were the ones who helped in the writing of the script, etc. So tell me, in your experience, what did you see there that you were perhaps expecting or not expecting, both in terms of the country, the people, and the sites that you went to?
You want to go? Yeah. I think the surprising thing for me was Turkey, how the transportation was just phenomenal. We were in one hotel, for example. To call a taxi, you just walk out of the door and there's a post with a button on it, and 2 minutes later the taxi arrives. It was amazing. A lot of local transportation, the streetcars and things were just modern. It was really wonderful. One thing I did notice, and I don't know why that's not more prevalent elsewhere, for blind people, down each sidewalk there was a yellow strip with dots on, and then a cross, so that a blind person could find their way down. It was just amazing how modern that is, how they're thinking about things like this. There are sidewalks everywhere, even out of the town, along the side of the highway, there's a sidewalk there. It just surprised me. It was very different from 1973, I have to say. My memory of 1973, I was in Izmir and I went to Marmaris and I caught a bus and we went across. It was like a dirt road. Dust was blowing, people were holding chickens under their arm. It was pretty amazing. So it had changed a lot. The highway system was excellent. Even Braxton drove on the highway. Yeah.
For a time.
For a time. For as long as I'd let him.
We had this magical day where we drove, clear across the whole country, didn't we? And we were singing 80s music to the top of our lungs.
They've seen the video.
We've seen the video.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It was, yeah. So that, I think, was a great plus. People were very friendly. Food was great wherever we went. It was just, it certainly was a welcoming environment, I think. Everybody was really friendly towards us. We were in a marketplace, and we attracted quite a crowd, actually. We were walking through this marketplace, and they were filming part of it as we did it. And there was some guy who came up. He just wouldn't leave, He thought we were famous. Well, he thought Braxton was famous. He thought I was just carrying the bag.
No. Yeah, I wish he made it into the documentary. I don't think he made it in, did he?
No, I don't think so. That's a point, actually, and I just want to lower your expectations before you see this. The premise of this was it's two friends going to see all these sites in Turkey, the biblical sites. But unfortunately, the way in which it's been cut so far, we start off together. And in fact, you see the first shot, we're walking and we part, and that's the last time you see us together. So these two friends are not together in the documentary. So that's something we're going to address. If you're making a documentary, and you must know this, you have to have an Englishman there as to authenticate it. And basically, that's what I am. They parachute me in here, and I say a few lines, and then here again, and the rest of it is my buddy Braxton.
What did they say?
Steve's fee was so high that we couldn't afford putting him in every shot. He wanted $10,000 per minute. How could we afford that?
They said
Come on,
something.
I was going to discount you 20%.
They said something about Stephen, like the director said something about Stephen, like he's got the essence of genuine. What are you? Genuine intelligence. Yeah.
It's only the essence. Poof, it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
So tell us about.
Well, I agree. If we're talking about Turkey and not the site specifically, there were two things that I was absolutely stunned with, and that was how incredibly loving and friendly and hospitable the people were, and then, of course, how clean and advanced everything is. I mean, when I'll tell you, I went to Izmir. The first time we were in Izmir, we walked up and down the strip by the sea there, and there was free Wi-Fi just out there, just all over just outdoors in the park. I mean, it's just incredible, and these beautiful restaurants, and people walking their dogs and sitting around and having dates and things like this. And then a couple of months later, I went to Australia, and on the way back from Australia, I had 9 hours in LA. And so I decided I'm going to go see Venice Beach, And so I left and went to Venice Beach, and I thought, I am in danger. This place is incredibly down. I should not be here. And I got an Uber and got out of there as fast as I could. I'm trying not to talk as fast. I know they translate for some, and it's hard. But the thing was, I was standing in L.A., in one of the most desirable states in the U.S., and I felt very unsafe. And in Izmir, on the water, in same sort of setup, I felt like I could lay down and take a nap and be safe. So that was impressive. Also, the people. I'll never forget. We were in this city called Akhisar, I think, and it's where we were there, and we were waiting to film, and Stephen and I went into this little cafe, just this little mom and pop sort of operation, and this lady was making us stuff and giving us a lot of free stuff because she was just so blown away that a Canadian and an American had come into her store, and the dad, her husband, was sitting over there in the corner, and he was reading his paper, and they were just the friendliest, most loving people. One day we had a tire blowout the day we were going to drive and sing our way across Turkey. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, this guy comes over and fixes our tire. I mean, just people are people. No matter where you are in the world, people are people. And that was a powerful thing to me. They still need Jesus wherever they are in the world, but people are people. And I was just struck by the hospitality of the people there.
Wonderful. Now tell us about the sites. What are your impressions that you brought back with you of the sites that you saw? Any one particular one that really stands out in your memory as the best one or biggest one or whatever?
I think the one we're going to see this evening is probably the best and the biggest. It's the most intact. It's the most magnificent in terms of the materials that are being used. My background is construction, so it was fascinating for me to see how they'd fasten marble onto the stone and all these kind of things. But Ephesus was really unbelievable. You can just picture yourself being there in the time of Paul, for example, walking towards the amphitheater. It just brought it all alive. It was amazing. I think Laodicea as a huge site also was very impressive. The others, incidentally, we came across the Church of Philadelphia by accident. We were looking for a place to go have some refreshment one afternoon, and the hotel was probably, 2 kilometers from the center? Yeah. So we decided we'd walk, and we looked. There were some tea houses with little old men playing whatever, drinking tea, and it wasn't really our scene. Yeah. So we continued walking, and we asked a few places, where can we sit outside, have a drink? Nowhere. And then eventually somebody said, what was it called? So we continued walking, and we asked a few places, where can we sit?
Top Tepe.
Top Tepe. Top Tepe. which was about another 2 kilometers, but up a vertical hill.
Yeah, we climbed a mountain. We can say we climbed a mountain.
Yeah, it was 70 degrees.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But we set off up this road, and then I said, that's Philadelphia. And by accident, we found this place.
The Church of Philadelphia.
Yeah. So we found this place, and we explored it, and the next day we were going to go there and film. So that was quite a nice surprise. And then we continued up the hill, and I think we earned a sit down, and you could overlook the town from this cafe at the top of the hill. It was
You
nice.
can't finish that story without saying that on the way back down the hill on foot, a woman of the city, an older woman, elderly lady, professed her love to Stephen.
She was 80 years old.
8-0.
She really did. She said, I love you.
I said, I'm coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I was going to say Ephesus. In fact, I had written down, to say tonight that Ephesus, because it's just an entire city of ruins, incredibly well preserved. And even if you've been to Rome or Israel, you're not going to find a place like that. Yeah. And what it does is, you talked about it changing how you view the Bible. Some of these stories, say the story that took place there, where in Ephesus, Paul's preaching against idolatry had impacted the economy of silversmiths and goldsmiths who were making their money selling these gold and idols and stuff. And so he was called on the carpet. And when you hear this in the Bible, when you read this in the Bible, you think about it happening on some dusty road somewhere. Well, that amphitheater that they were trying to draw him into is massive, as you'll see tonight. And it really does. And one of the things that Stephen says in the trailer for this film is, you have to see it, he says, in vibrant color and from every angle.
You've memorized that.
Yes. You have to see it. And he's right. You do have to see it, because reading about it, you get a picture in your mind, but when you see it, it is just stunning.
Yeah.
And so that's powerful. But there's something else. One of the sites that doesn't get a lot of play when people talk about the sites in Turkey is a place called Perge. And Perge is where famously John Mark turned back from the missionary journey with Paul. And nothing much else do we get out of Perge in terms of biblical material. But when you go there, there is an entrance to the city. They have several entrances from different periods of time. But one of the entrances was the one that was there in the first century when Paul would have come to the city. So this may not mean much to you, but for me, I thought the space is only probably about as wide as from the end of that row to the end of that row. So you can go in, stand in there, and walk back and forth very briefly and say, there is no question. If Paul came into this city, I'm standing where Paul stood. And that's pretty powerful. Not to make a Messiah figure out of Paul, but still one of our incredible biblical characters. And so that was I think those two moments for me, Ephesus and that time in Perge, were pretty powerful.
Wonderful. So how do you think this documentary is going to help us as far as, besides the commercial aspects of it, which we want to get it out there and show it in television networks, but how would you think this would help us, both as a church or as a theological seminary, to convey something that would be of benefit to our Christian brothers and sisters, or even people who are not a Christian but very curious about history and archaeology?
Well, for many of you, one of the things I love about this church is the incredible diversity that exists here. And for some of you who were not raised in the Southern American states, this isn't maybe that this way for you, but for me, when you hear about the stories that are in the Bible, stories that took place in Israel, Egypt, Rome, Turkey, it feels like some storybook somewhere else, It feels a little bit like Middle Earth from Lord of the Rings, This is almost like some fictional land out there in your fantasy. But when you go there, you see that, no, you can actually stand where Paul stood, and the same is true in Israel. But in Turkey, I've been to Israel 3 times, and Israel gets a lot of attention. And I think that's appropriate. Much of the Bible took place in Israel. However, Turkey is so forgotten, and in the modern evangelical mindset, I mean. It's just, but yet it is, I think you said it, Ed, it's very much the world of the New Testament is Turkey. Again, I don't want to drone on, but I will say this real quickly. Just in the debate that I had the other day, one of the things I was trying to lay out is we believe the Bible, because it's the Word of God. The Holy Spirit testifies to us the truth of our faith and all of that. But when I was having the debate, my opponent doesn't take that for granted. So I was trying to share with him that scholars believe, that someone named Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark, and he was giving you the eyewitness testimony of Peter, and that John was written by a disciple of Jesus, and so it very well could have been John. And of course, we know that we believe it was John, but they'll give you all this stuff. When it comes to Matthew, the majority of New Testament scholars today do not believe that Matthew wrote Matthew, but I do. One of the good reasons is because in Hierapolis, where we went on this trip, a man named Papias lived at the end of the first century. And Papias says that Matthew wrote something that was probably the book of Matthew, and he would have known. What was great about it was, I've now been to Hierapolis. And so it brings all of this history and all of this stuff to life for the church. And this documentary, for people that aren't able to go, and I hope that many of you do, but for those that aren't, it brings it to them in a way that hopefully because of not just the visuals, but the emotion and the music and all of the stuff that goes into this art form of filmmaking, that it will impact them in some way like it impacted us.
Yeah, I think that's right. It brings it, it's tangible. It makes those words on the page come to life. And I think that's where it's going to be a very important asset in order to promote a biblical perspective on life, basically. These are real places, they were real people. It's documented historically, aside from what's in the Bible. It's indisputable. And I think if we can bring that, and I think also bring an awareness to the Turkish people themselves that, hey, you have a heritage way before Islam got there, which is part of your heritage, part of who you are, and maybe you should pay attention to that. And maybe that will start to turn people's minds a little more towards Christ also. So I think it's
real quick. 2, I just hope it brings attention to Turkey. I just, like we took up an offering a little while ago for the people of Turkey who need it. I think that, as an American, I think Americans need to understand what's actually going on in Turkey and not just what they've been told by the news or even by some preachers. I think they need to know what's really going on and how to pray for people in Turkey and what they can do to reach people in Turkey. And I hope that the documentary does that. And then, of course, the Turkish people would come to know about these sites.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amen. I guess we're almost out of time. We're going to watch the documentary. So one last question, and that is, what was your experience with the crew? How did you enjoy working with the director, the assistant director, the camera? Any one particular event that stands out in your mind?
Well, it was total fun. I mean, they were great people. The interaction the whole time, particularly with Mani, the director, who was really good. Here's one instance. At the beginning, of course, Turkey was hot. We were there, September, early September. It was hot, so you're standing around in the sun waiting to get your shots done. Not those kind of shots. And they'd come up and they'd mop your brow and make up. First day or two, it was like that, pampered totally. Yeah. You were the same, right?
Sure, yeah.
Afterwards, no way. Maybe the driver would come with a box of tissues and a bottle of water, but the rest, you're on your own.
Well, I don't know. They kept powdering my nose.
But no, they were really, really friendly people. We enjoyed them tremendously. Hopefully, they enjoyed our company and our antics as well. It was great. Yeah, really had a good time.
My wife, Sarah, made friends really well with a girl that was on the crew who was the makeup artist and I think assistant director, Masa. And they became good friends. And even after we came back, we continued to talk to her a little bit. The director was an interesting guy, and we bonded with him. They were definitely a very professional crew. I mean, they knew what they were doing. They knew their craft. They knew how to get the shots. That's what they were really best at, is incredible cinematography, and I don't think any of us have any question.
Oh, the guy with the drone was just amazing.
Yeah.
A lot of the shots you'll see with the drone are just phenomenal.
The crew, you asked us about the crew, but I want to reiterate what Stephen says, and I'm not saying this just because he's sitting here. In terms of people I didn't know before I went on that trip, I had met Stephen, but there is no question that I bonded most with Stephen. I made a lifelong friend in Stephen, and I've shared things with Stephen that other people I would have known for 10 years before I would share with, and I really feel a closeness, a friendship. So even if you don't pick up, as he said from the documentary, that it was two friends going across Turkey.
It was.
It was two guys at first. By the end of that trip, I feel like it was two brothers that went across Turkey.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely right. Everybody.
So how many people want to go to Turkey now that you heard about it? You want to do some repeats?
so
we'll
we're just a
give you a discount on the
promotional
repeats. All
We
right.
just need to promote your tour.
We may do a trip and have these guys host it this time. Yeah, Brax and Steve host the trip, and you're going to have a laugh of your lifetime. Anyways, thank you guys. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, brother.